All right, so we've got one of our superstars on today's call. We've got Jolene, and I see Jolene Wright. Did you end up changing your last name to Madrid?
I haven't officially, but I'm probably just gonna keep it right at work.
Okay.
Separation.
So your work life, you'll be known as Jolene Wright, but in your personal life, you'll be Jolene Madrid.
Yeah.
They both have a nice ring to it,
You
whichever way
know,
you.
Benny's gonna get credit for everything. His kids work here, he works here. Like, this is gonna look really cool for him. So
Mm. Well, we all know behind the scenes, you're the one that's making him look good. We all know that.
I like to think that too. Thanks. Thanks,
Yeah.
Jamie.
Yeah. Behind every great man's a great woman, and you guys work together, and so obviously, I mean, you're pacing to hit, consultant promotion, if not this year, then 2026. But my best estimations on what I see is you're going to get promoted probably at NatCon this year. Does that sound about right?
I think so. I mean, if everything goes well, I need one more owner and I'll be a consultant.
That's beautiful. So give us your, I mean, give us your story, not just the timeline in the business. And maybe we can start there because, you just started in the business. I mean, it's not like you've been around that long. And then my follow-up is you give us your timeline in the business. I'm curious, I've heard you talk about it even on stage, your childhood and growing up. And I'm just kind of curious if you've got this chip on your shoulder that just drives you to be successful. So anyway, I'll let you kind of unpack all of that.
Okay. I guess I'll start, at the beginning and then we'll kind of make it to the end, okay? If I get distracted, just tell me to go backwards or something. So a little bit about me. I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Washington State. Um, I grew up with my mom and one of my older sisters. I actually grew up in a protection program in hiding from my dad. And so we lived there till I was about 11. It was like a really small town in the middle of nowhere. Long story short, we ended up kind of losing our protection and ended up having to move. And so we moved to Portland. That's where the rest of my family lives. I'm the youngest of 11. So all the rest of my siblings live there. And my parents did as well. And to kind of give you a little bit of insight, both of my parents and all of my siblings were drug addicts. And so, growing up, I didn't see anybody really be successful or like, really have much at all. I kind of just, they were like, if you get a job and you don't do drugs, you're doing great. So, um, one thing I didn't know growing up, I didn't have anybody telling me, I need to go to school or do anything like that. I did know that I didn't want to be like that. I didn't want to, live that lifestyle, wanted to be different. And so I thought what was going to make me different was going to school and playing sports. So I pretty much did anything to get my hands on. I played basketball, volleyball, soccer. I did literally everything and I was horrible at sports. If you guys know anything about soccer, I was a forward and I didn't make my first goal until my third year. So I was incredibly bad. And so once I finally made a goal, I was like, okay, I'm done with this. But I thought really that was kind of the line that separated people. Sports was, what separated, the disciplined people from the undisciplined people. So I thought, that was my identity. Um, and I mostly stuck with basketball. I did that. I played on two teams, a tournament team and one for my school, all middle school. My freshman year, I was on Oregon State as a freshman. So I was really excited. I ended up fracturing all my vertebrae from here down in kind of an accident in my freshman year. So I wasn't able to play sports anymore. And so I kind of got lost. I wasn't, one that really wanted to do school anyways and wasn't really pushed to. So it's kind of tough for me to stay in it. I ended up dropping out of high school my freshman year. Then again, my sophomore year, both my parents had become homeless like my sophomore year. My dad got a divorce with his wife and he ended up becoming homeless. And a couple months later, my mom did as well. And so um, trying to figure out school and where to live at the same time is kind of tough. So I dropped out again my sophomore year. And then I kind of got to a point when my life had reached that point where, I was staying around to kind of take care of my parents, but I was living from place to place and kind of wherever I could. And I kind of went out on a dark path, and I realized that like if I didn't leave and finish what I was, if I didn't leave where I was at, that I was going to end up pretty much dead or in jail. So um kind of had a snap back to reality moment and was like, okay, I need to get my life together. And one of my aunts, who is kind of separate from my mom, she's my mom's younger sister. I didn't know her super well, but there was a school shooting when I was in high school, and she'd seen it on the news and tried to get a hold of my parents, and couldn't get a hold of anybody. So she called me and she's like, "Are you okay?" Whatever. And she owned properties all around the like Portland metro area. She works for, the largest garbage company in the entire world. And she had done well for herself, and she had offered me to come do some work for her. And so I did that to kind of take care of my family. And she would always tell me like, there's more to life than what you're doing. And, there's more to life. You're not responsible for your parents and things like that. And so kind of all those things coming together, I realized like, okay, I need to stop doing what I'm doing, and I need to, go make something of my life. And so I moved in with her the beginning of my junior year of high school. And I got back into high school. I was a junior in freshman classes. And I did well. I did well for like, the first term semester, whatever you call it. But I went to my school counselor, said, listen, I don't want to be a seventh year senior. I'm going to drop out, try to get my GED and try to go to college. And she'd referred me to a program essentially where if you get accepted in, they give you a diploma, like a real high school diploma, but you're going to college. And so I did 3 interviews, 3 essays. I got accepted into the program. I did really well, I would say, for about a year going to school, and that's pretty much the only education that I have. But at the time I was working 3 jobs and, trying to take care of myself, and I really couldn't make any I couldn't make any changes. I wasn't, improving anything. I felt like I had the same amount of money, was going to school, and I hadn't seen anybody that had, really made money from going to school. And so I'm like, God, I got to change something. Long story short, I've always my entire life wanted to live in Arizona, and being from Portland, it rains 9 months a year. And Arizona was like, it's sunny there all the time. That's all I knew. I'd never visited or anything like that. So I dropped my scholarship, quit all of my jobs, and moved to Arizona. Not thinking about it enough, I'm like, man, like, I'm gonna find a job, and then I'm gonna get into school. And then I looked up in-state tuition, out-of-state tuition. If you guys know the difference, it's pretty big yearly. And so I decided that I'm gonna wait a year, work, and get in-state tuition in a year. Um, and so I did that. The first job that I had, I said, when I was looking for jobs, I said, the last thing I'm gonna do is door-to-door sales. I'll do any kind of sales, but not door-to-door. And the first job interview that I had was door-to-door sales. So I interviewed with, about 5 years ago, I interviewed with Benny in a CenturyLink office in Phoenix. Um, I started there. I was there for about 3 months on residential, and then something happened in that office. So we then got moved to retail here in Phoenix, and then Benny got promoted to assistant manager or management in June of 2019. I got promoted to assistant manager December of 2019, and then I was going to open up March of 2020. If you guys know what happened March of 2020, right? And then I finally opened up my office September of 2020.
I mean, remarkable, Jolene. So, I mean, when I think of your story, I can't help but recall a Tony Robbins seminar when he was, young, and he's describing this black girl growing up in the South when, racism was still a thing, not like it's not a thing anymore, but like things were different, a generation ago.
Sure.
She was sexually abused at a young age, and he's just describing this horrific kind of childhood. And he says, "Please welcome to the stage Oprah Winfrey." And it's kind of like, whoa, like I didn't expect that to be Oprah. It sounded like a really hard luck story, but it was like one of the most influential people in show business. And so your story kind of reminds me of that. Like you didn't have like I'm sure you know this, you didn't have a normal childhood, First of all, one of 11 siblings, You have 11 siblings? You're one of 12 or you're one of 11?
I'm the youngest of 11.
The
Yeah.
youngest of 11. Um, moving around, all that stuff, like, and you have such a good attitude, such a good spirit. You don't seem to have, you're not a victim. Like, how did you get over all that? I mean, what's your, what's that all about?
Well, I've never been compared to Oprah, so I'm gonna take that as a win. So thank you. That's awesome. Um, when you say that, Jamie, when people said my childhood wasn't normal, I actually realized that like as an adult. People would kind of say things, they'd be like, that's really weird. I'm like, what? Like, what do you mean? And so I don't know. I think the reason I look at things the way that I do was because out of all my siblings, there's only one that's not a drug addict and in prison or both. Um, and so, throughout, I think if you watch that many people, both my parents, my siblings, you know, do drugs and that whole kind of lifestyle, it's really hard to think that that's what I should do with my life. And so, my oldest sister, or no, I'm sorry, the sister that's closest to me in age, um, she was about 9 years older than me, and I had watched her make some really terrible choices, and she was my idol growing up. Um, and so I'm like, it was close to home already, but it had kind of happened right in front of my face because we were like, connected at the hip. The rest of my siblings, we have a pretty big age gap. And so, seeing all that, like I was just like, I can't do that. I've seen it happen over and over again with all of them. I'm 26 as of today, and my oldest brother is 62. So I have, they're all kind of spread out. And so if you see it that wrong that many times, you're kind of like, okay, maybe I need to get it together.
It's your birthday today.
It is. Yeah.
Well, happy birthday, man. We're blessed that you could be a lot of different places and here you are on Zoom with us. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. We
Um,
were supposed to be at Top Gun, but the fires and stuff over there. Hopefully you guys are over there doing okay.
I mean, there's new fires popping all over the place. It's kind of crazy. We need a little rain. I've never wanted humidity worse than I do now. We need a little water here would be good.
I can imagine.
Um, So, I'm back to like Tony Robbins. I can't help it. You're like you should be interviewed by Tony Robbins, not me. But, Tony interviewed, there was two brothers. I can't remember which one of his books this story is in, but there were two brothers that couldn't have been on opposite ends of the spectrum any more than they were. One was in jail for a long period of time. The other was wildly successful. He interviewed both brothers, asked the same question, like, why do you think you ended up where you ended up? And he was shocked that they both gave the exact same answer. And the answer was, well, first of all, that the father was in prison himself. He was a bad dude. It might have been murder or something like that, but it was some bad stuff. And both brothers said, well, look at my father. What other choice did I have? That was their response. Again, one goes on to be wildly successful, the other doesn't. So again, I'm just trying to pack the psyche of like, you know, you took a different path than your siblings. You just looked at things different, I guess. Is that kind of how you think about it? I mean,
Yeah, I just, I was around for kind of all of their, they'd all had a time in life where they didn't really, everything was kind of going okay. And then I would watch their choices and kind of see it happen right in front of me. And so, they also, a lot of them had children, have children. And so, you know, when my niece was born, I was 11. I was there. I was the third person to ever see her after she was born. I, felt like it was my responsibility because my aunt cared about me and, made sure that I was okay, that I had a responsibility for her the same way. And so, just watching them, it's tough to, I think it's really tough to see other people's mistakes and choose to do them. For me, that doesn't make sense. Some people are like, oh, I have to skin my face to learn. That's not me. That's not me at all. No. I see people and the choices they make and, I decide to make plans accordingly. I'm not going to try it for myself. So, and
Mm,
I certainly had choices that I made that weren't great, but I definitely, no matter what, was not going to go down that route.
mm. Do you look at it now that you feel that you have an advantage growing up the way you did, like with a little bit of that hunger, knowing what you don't want?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think it's an advantage. I think that, I have also experienced a lot of things, which it seems odd, but I've experienced a lot of things that people don't experience by 26. So three of my siblings have passed away. My dad passed away. And so, people that I work with now, right? Benny's siblings are the same age as mine, and he's, 16 years older than me. Both of those parents are still alive. And so, I've just kind of experienced life in that sense. Whereas, a lot of people won't experience that until way later on. And I think it's fortunate for me because I can help my guys through it. I can help people through those experiences and kind of how I dealt with things.
Mm.
Uh, and so, you could look at it either way, but I choose to look at it like that for sure.
Well, I certainly appreciate you being so raw and vulnerable. I even asked you before the call, like, do you mind if we, you talk about this stuff on stage, and I've always had the curiosity, like, man, I'd like to know more because it's so,
Yeah,
you
anything.
know,
Ask me anything.
yeah, and but I appreciate again you being vulnerable, and it just kind of breaks my heart to hear those stories. But you've come out of it like a champion, like just like it just gives me so much hope that no matter what people have gone through, right? You think about all the different kinds of personalities that show up in our offices, and you came from a difficult background, but boy, have you made the best. If you were dealt 7-2 unsuited, you're going all in and you're getting like, somehow you're winning the hand, with even though you're dealt a tough hand. So you're very inspirational, Jolene. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I figured that, well, you gotta make something happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I tell my kids all the time, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade kind of thing. It's like, I mean, I got to get them to meet you because you know, you've made some lemonade here. So that's
Oh,
fantastic.
thank you.
So to shift gears a little bit, lighter, I'll go on a little bit of a lighter note. So again, you've only been in the business for 5 years. I mean, you've been open since 2020, you're saying,
Yeah. Yeah,
right
I
after
started like about a year before that.
a year before that. And then we went through, you're referring to March of 2020, like, oh yeah, something happened in March of 2020. Um, something COVID like. Um,
Yeah. I was gonna open in March. I thank God I didn't because a friend of mine, he opened his office that same week and he closed down 5 days later because of COVID. So it's unfortunate for him. So I'm lucky I didn't open up then, you know.
well, it's so interesting how it's all played out. Like I was on a call earlier this week with Sessions and Osborne, and we all kind of had a hunch that, boy, we're going to experience some significant growth from this event. Because that's, for whatever reason, that's our trend. Like when we're throwing some radical, tough stuff, we thrive. Like we do really well in business, right? So it's interesting how somebody like you has gone on and be like, wow, you joined the business in 2019 and here you are knocking on the door of a promotion to consultant. Like you've done extremely well. What do you credit that to? Like why are you doing so well in the business? And maybe a follow-up with that is, have you experienced in the business difficult times, or do you sort of laugh like, difficult times? You guys don't know difficult. Why don't you come with me to Washington and meet my family?
Well, so okay, yeah, so I'll kind of give you a backstory about like my time in ownership. Um, I was very, very close to my dad. He was my best friend. I mean, he called me twice a day, every day, my entire life. Even if, he'd made some questionable choices for sure. We were super close. Um, the month that I opened my office, I actually found out my dad had cancer. And my dad had been homeless. He had kind of lost everything in a divorce when I was about 16. So he lived in a motorhome on the side of the street. And so my goal, and probably why I didn't stay in college and take that route, was because I really wanted to help him. Um, he was part of, what happened in the 90s where everyone lost their retirement. I was born and he's 51, so we were, really big difference in age for sure. But he had lost his retirement and stuff in the 90s, and then he had lost everything in a divorce. And then he was living in a motorhome. He had no running water. It was in rough shape essentially. And we were super, super close. And when I moved to Arizona, I told myself I'm gonna move there and I'm gonna bring him here so he can have better quality of life. And he had lung problems and it's easier to breathe when there's not as much humidity. And so when I found out he had cancer, it was more to me, right, when I first opened my office, that I really need to like get going here. And so when I opened my office, I had actually started with two leaders, because my leaders that I was going to open with before, they were like selling drugs to the new guys, and I had to fire them, like the same week. And so they were like, "Oh, you're opening," and I'm like, "Well, shit." Excuse my language. I didn't mean to cuss, but I had to open with those two leaders. That one had started right before COVID, and then one had started like a couple months before that. And we were opening up on I opened up on EDM, and Benny at the time was on CenturyLink. And so they were like, "Oh, you can stay in Arizona, but you have to do a different campaign." And I said, "Okay, let's see what happens." So it was me and my two leaders, and then we took 2 day ones, basically, my first day on EDM. And I went from basically like 2 people to 30 by the end of my first month. And so I done really, really well. And my attest to that is that I had to make it happen. I really wanted to pay for him, and I really wanted, to get him to move to Arizona, and I wanted to be able to buy him a house and somewhere to live and all these things. And so it really pushed me to get my shit together, basically, quickly. Um, and then when right before he passed, January of 2021. So about 6 months later, roughly. The month before he passed away, I was actually in a store pitching, and I had a customer who was looking for a phone charger, and she had asked me, "Oh, do you know where the phone, I need a car charger." And we somehow got into the conversation that she was living in her car here because her husband has brain cancer, and there's a treatment center in Arizona that's 94% effective at stage 4 for cancer treatment. And I go, "Oh my God, my dad has cancer and I'm, looking for treatment. If you don't mind asking, how much are you paying?" And it was about 3,000 a week. And so I'd made enough money to pay for him to get cancer treatment, and I was able to offer it to him. And that was my goal. He didn't want to take it. He was in his 70s and stuff like that, and he was in rough shape. But that was my goal, was to like make that happen. And so when he passed, I had about 30 leaders, almost promoted to assistant managers. And then from about 4 years ago, when he passed, I had, in the next 3 weeks, I went down to 4 people. And so I was at 4 people from that point until September of 2021. And so I had a really, really terrible time. I wasn't sure that I even, at the beginning of EDM, I was showing up to the office, but I wasn't really there. I had a couple of my reps committing fraud. I didn't know about it. And 6 of my top leaders quit, like one by one, handed in their iPads on like a Saturday morning. And I'm like, "Oh my God, like what's happening?" And finally this girl told me, she was like, "Oh yeah, this person's like committing fraud, and we don't condone it." And I'm like, "I don't condone it either. Like, I didn't even know what was going on." Like, I'm like, "My dad just passed," like, and I was like, "Holy shit, what's going on?" And it just, I never thought about what life I was gonna have, really. I wanted to make sure that my dad was okay. That was super, super important to me. And so when he passed away, it was like I was like, "I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm doing this." I don't, have anything really. Why am I working so hard? And so it was really tough for me to build relationships. And I also didn't process his passing. Like, he passed away when I was at team night. I went one day, got his stuff, and then came back and like went to work. I acted like it didn't happen. And so I had a really tough time building relationships. I couldn't get anybody. I could not get over 5 people. Um, and eventually I turned it around when Benny was having a conversation with my hub. Um, and Casey Marlowe, and they didn't know I was listening. And he was on the phone with her, and she was like, just shut her down until she can, let her be a manager in your office until she can get it together. And I was like, holy shit, like I'm gonna go out of business. And I went down to like literally $0 in my business bank account. And in that time, I had realized why I was doing so bad was because I was just thinking about how it was going before. Like, man, I almost had two assistant managers. I was doing so well. I was making all this money. And then I just couldn't think, I couldn't get past it. And so I, kind of sat down with myself and I decided that I was so sick and tired of feeling like shit all the time and feeling like anything wasn't going my way that I was like, I'm just going to make a goal and I'm going to get, 12 liters and $20,000 in the bank by December. That's my goal. And anytime I want to think about what happened before, I'm just going to think about that. And so from that point, um, I had I had 20 people and I had more than 20 grand in the bank by December. And all the people that actually started in that time are the people that have been promoted and will get promoted. So Kayla, Ethan, Mike, all the guys that I have, that little pirate crew that I had, they're all gonna run offices. They did started two last year and this year going forward. So, um, it certainly was not easy. I had a really, really rough go for sure.
I mean, just amazing. I mean, you're the poster girl of like how to deal with adversity. You lose a couple reps because they were selling drugs, then you're losing a few reps because they're committing fraud. It's like, so you had a rough hand, even in business. It's not like you had this easy ride, in business by any means. And you just handle what a lot of people would look at as extremely stressful situations with a lot of grace. Like, have
Thank
you
you.
have you noticed that about yourself? Like, is that like a superpower of yours that you're well aware of, or are you just sort of like you don't even know necessarily?
I tell Benny that I'm really lucky. And he would look at me and be like, what are you talking about? And I think that I am, and I think that, right, perspective is reality, right? And the people that get to choose our perspective is us. And so in life, does any of us know if luck is real or not? No, it's a perspective. And so if I get to choose, I choose to believe that I'm lucky. So, every scenario, I will find a way that I'm lucky because I just think that I am. And I think that, that's why I've been able to deal with adversity well is because I'm just lucky.
Hmm.
At least that's what I tell myself.
I mean, you have such an inspiring mindset and attitude. And I guess couple that, I did ask you, like, what you think you're great at. Obviously, you referenced attitude, perspective, how your mindset, how you think. I mean, but the other piece that should be noted as well too is you've got a crazy work ethic. I mean, have you always had a crazy work ethic? Like, what's that all about?
I would say yes. I hadn't seen anybody like work. I didn't see my parents have a job or anything like that. My mom bartended when I was really young, but my dad was retired by the time I was born and he's 51, so he was retired like pretty much my entire life. And so, they don't wake up early by any means. I had actually brought Benny to go meet some of my family, and we got to the airport at like 9 in the morning, and he's like, "We should go meet them for breakfast." And I'm like, "Benny, these aren't breakfast kind of folk, dear. Like, we're not going to breakfast. They don't wake up until 3." Like, back to what I was saying about sports, it was just really what I thought that separated people was the people that worked hard and the people that didn't. I remember like being really young and we didn't have any food, and I would be like, "Mom, just work. Like, go get a job." And she'd be like, "No, that's not how this works." And I'm like, "No, I'm pretty sure like everyone else's parents work. You just don't." And so, um, I just figured that in my mind, that was what separated people. And because my parents worked, that's the life that they had. And so to me, it was like, that's the first thing I wanted to do was like get a job and be able to, make money myself because, I didn't like the life that I had had growing up. and so it was just like innate. I cannot do something and not do it well just because I just can't half-ass things, which is what drew me to commission initially because, I'd sold sunglasses in Oregon and I didn't know it was a commission role. And when I went to quit, I was the number one salesperson on my region for 12 months in a row, and I had no idea because every person on the team has to hit their commission goal for you to get commission, and it's only 2%. And so I hadn't seen any of the commission. And so when they told me I was the number one person, I was like, oh, wow. And I'm like, man, like I was doing well this whole time and could have been making commission. So I'm like, I'm going to go get a full commission job. And I was really excited about doing commission just because I thought that was something that, like I was like, man, I can make a ton of money working based on, how hard I'm willing to work. But it was just because I think that's what separates people. And I'm scared of losing everything. So I feel like that makes me work really hard as well.
Mm. I mean, you know what it's like on the other side. So, Danny Giannone was on a call end of last year too. Here's a guy that's got $2 million in the in his business bank account, and he still hits the field. It's like, and and the driver is, well, I could lose it all. I'm like, dude, you're beyond losing it all. Like you'd have to really make some poor decisions to lose $2 million. But I like that. I think there's a good healthy fear can be a great motivator for people.
Yeah, I think so. I think about it every day. I'm like, oh man, what if they all quit? What if everything just goes to shit? Like people are like, that's not gonna happen. And I'm like, you don't know what could happen. And
Right.
so, that's kind of how I just live my life.
Right.
Healthy, nonetheless. Who knows?
Yeah. No, that's awesome, Jolene. Well, we're pretty much at time, but I hope I mean, this was kind of one of these raw type of, interviews, and I think you're going to inspire a lot of people with your testimony and your story. I'm hoping we could follow up in the near future just on some tactical stuff. Like, all right, so we know Jolene, we know her background. Now let's get into some of the science on how this girl is, she's opened 9 companies within 5 years. I mean, that's an impressive feat. And so obviously you're equipped with a great attitude, you're equipped with a great work ethic. So you've got, you've got the right raw materials, but you're making some interesting decisions, running your business, opening new companies. And I'd like to follow up, within the next few months, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever you'd like. I'm honored that you guys wanted to hear me talk.
Well, of
Thank you.
course, you're intriguing, Jolene. Like, I can't be the only person that hears you speak at an event. It's kind of like I want more. I want to know this girl's story. Like you are a very remarkable individual. So we appreciate your example and your attitude. It's very inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. I appreciate that.
Okay. We'll talk to you
Thank
soon,
you.
Jolene.
Happy
Thank you.
birthday.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, and happy birthday.
Thank you.